Hello, everyone. This is Tulani Bridgewater Kowalski. I am back with you at the Wolfer TV, and I am thrilled today to be welcoming an author who I've just now met, but whose memoir I have truly enjoyed. This is Samantha Hart, and today we're going to be speaking about her memoir, Blind Pony, which is absolutely fantastic. And I love that you say, as true a story as I can tell, which is incredibly honest, which is right in keeping with the book itself. So welcome, Samantha. Thank you. And I'm going to call you Sam going forward.
Thank you, Tulani. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So before we start talking about the book and all of that, it would be wonderful if you could let our audience know just a little bit about you, because you have a very impressive career professionally, but you also have obviously the personal story, which is in the book. So I'll kind of let you touch on any highlights you'd like to share.
Well, I would have to say I have been very fortunate, very lucky that I have had a wonderful career, and I have a beautiful family, and I have 3 amazing children. But I think I wrote this book because I feel like so much, even like you could say, I have all this, who would want more? I think I wrote the book because I felt that I needed more, like that all the secrets that are in the book, all the things that I held back inside of me kept me from growing in many ways, not just my career, but, you know, not just professionally, but emotionally, and just becoming a better person, I think. So I think that, you know, in writing this book, I think it really unleashed the best version of me before it was too late, before I'm gone. You know, I wanted to do that. It was very important to me. So I think that this is definitely the pinnacle of my career. I mean, I've worked on some fantastic films, and I've worked in advertising, and I've done some pretty spectacular campaigns or whatever, but nothing really feels like this for me.
Well, I think I can, and so we'll start talking about the content of your memoir in a little bit, but I think, you know, all of your professional achievement is remarkable, not only because this business is really hard. I also am in entertainment like you. I'm on the music end of things, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult to have a long-lasting career, and then to be a woman and have a long-lasting career. It's multiple layers of challenge, and it requires a lot of perseverance and courage and dedication, and a little bit of, I think, insanity, because at times you feel like you're going crazy, or everywhere you're surrounded by crazy people. And so, but you know, so I want to just say that that's not a small thing. So everyone, when you look up Samantha's bio, you'll be, I think, duly impressed. But I understand what you're saying about wanting to be the very best version of yourself and wanting to essentially get to a point where you can continue to evolve as a person. And part of that is addressing what, and I hope I'm not being bold, but you really experienced intergenerational trauma, because the trauma you experienced is the trauma your mother experienced, and who knows how far back it goes, and then your father and so forth. So, you know, I don't want to give too much away, but I don't know if you feel comfortable I mean, obviously you feel comfortable talking about it because it's all here.
Yeah, well,
but, you know, there's
tell.
Trauma, yeah, and there are traumas of multiple varieties, because it's rare that it's just one thing. But I'm sure it was challenging for you because you, like you said, you have children. So all of a sudden you're unraveling the myth of family, not just for yourself, but going all the way back.
Well, I mean, I really honestly remember the moment when I was, you know, waiting for the pregnancy test to turn pink, and as soon as it did, I said, this stops with me. You know, this child will want for nothing. I will take such, you know, she will be she's my universe. That became my life's mission, was my daughter. And, you know, it as much as I loved her, and as much as I felt the love being returned by her was as sad as it was to me that I wasn't loved in the same way. Right? So every day, you know, you look at your child, you just love them so much, you don't know where to put all that love. And then you're reminded that you weren't not loved like that.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot, you know. And so you can see how these cycles, you know, repeat, because, you know, when you recognize you have a vulnerability, you want to be in denial about that, then anything that reminds you of that, you just push it away. And that was what happened with me. Obviously, I reminded my mother of her own vulnerabilities, and so she was just as well, you know, it was just as well if I was not around, you know, to remind her of that. So it's very complicated. And I went to a lot of therapy to kind of get right with it. And, you know, in fact, I don't know that, you know, one ever does. And that's what angers me so much about why people don't believe victim stories. Because, you know, I mean, sure, there's, you know, one could say, well, they were after someone's money or this or that. But I can, you know, when I see a victim or when I hear a victim and they're saying exactly the same things that I felt, you know, and I see it in their face, and I know it's true. That why would you make this up? And so, you know, I think that I wrote the book a lot for a lot of reasons. I think just to open this whole can of worms, you know, just this whole, it goes on. And I say, I've been saying this more and more from writing the book and hearing from readers, there are a lot of blind ponies out there.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
And maybe I've heard stories that are worse than what I experienced, and some that aren't, you know, maybe as severe, but nonetheless, very traumatic, very traumatizing to this person or these people and it takes years to get over it. Sometimes you never get over it.
Well, and just so our audience understands, we are talking about intergenerational sexual abuse, as well as physical abuse, as well as emotional and psychological abuse. It's the entire range of abuses that one can be subjected to as a small child going into young adolescence. And this all took place in the home at the hands of your grandfather, your mother's father, and you had an absent father because your parents' marriage was not good. And, you know, unfortunately, because of your mother's experiences, she was not in a position or willing to deal with it in a way that she could advocate for you and protect you, because she endured largely the same things, to the best of our knowledge. And you determined that you were going to remove yourself from the situation as soon as you were able, which is in itself pretty remarkable because you're in rural Pennsylvania. And I think that one of the things that really caught me about your story is how your mother got away, essentially. You know, she traded one bad situation for another and then yet returned and brought you and your sisters there. And it's the backdrop of your life is this very bucolic, beautiful, all-American. I mean, it's almost like an American Gothic type setting, and yet it's totally horrible. Everything about it's horrible. And to grapple with that as a child and to try to make sense of it when you really have very little support, because as you write, and I don't think this is giving too much away, one of your closest places of home was your grandmother. And with her no longer, you know, being with you when she passed away, you were really left in a terrible predicament. But as you journey through the rest of your life, you know, you said coming to terms with it. I don't know if we ever come to terms with traumatic things that happen to us. My impression is that we learn how to understand them the best way we can. And we learn how to live with them more than anything else, because they're a part of who we are. But yeah, you know, and you said, you know, with your daughter, I think that there's something that happens. It's not always with children. There are many pivotal moments that all of us can have, but there's a moment where you make a decision. I'm either going to change, I'm going to make some measurable, radical change. I'm going away from this, or you fall back into repeating. And I've noticed with a lot of people, and I speak for myself, you kind of have two paths. You either relive your past experience, which is basically what your mom ended up doing, unfortunately, or you disembark the crazy train. So, good for you. But then you also have, there's this whole element that reminded me of like a cross between a Hunter S. Thompson novel and Almost Famous. And you're just like this brazen young woman. And I love that.
I was determined. I was determined to lead there by any means necessary. And some of the hijinks that I came up with that aren't in the book, I mean, just I go back and read these journals, and I just, I can't believe this child was having all these feelings. I'm so glad I kept those journals, and I am, I hide them from my husband. I won't let anybody read them. I'm told my daughter, burn these when I die, because I never expected to write all this down. But I just really wanted to be my authentic self. I think that was the one piece missing. And I feel like, that all this, it's like a disease, and it is sort of just festering inside of you. And even though you feel like you've cleared yourself, you've changed the energy field around you, you've raised 3 intelligent, beautiful children that are all remarkable and successful in their own ways and all that, there's these little dark spaces that they're still there. And I feel like in writing the book, I finally just let go of it all. I just jumped off the cliff and just said, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna put my panties in the breeze, and this is who I am. And I need to be I need to be my authentic self. I need to reconnect with that child, to really feel her pain and acknowledge her pain and understand it. If I didn't tell anybody about it, then what was all that, then it's kind of like I'm in denial of it.
Right.
So absolutely. I think something like that, I think, is, a lot of people ask me, why do you feel you need to write this book now? And I think it is because I'm at my most joyous, my most, fulfilled, that I was able to do it. I think that when I was, at different places in my life or trying to get successful, I certainly wouldn't have told anybody, I mean, and a lot of the stories of, once I'm British until someone says I sound more Australian, and then just like that, I'm Australian. And it's just, I was bumbling along through life, just trying to find my identity. It's really a book about identity in a way, and, finding your authentic self. I mean, and each of us is born so unique and so wonderful. And then all these things are, layered onto us that we didn't ask for. I wasn't this way because I was that way. My circumstances pushed me down this road. So I think that there were some paths I would have maybe thought maybe I could have made better choices at times.
Well, I mean, I kind of feel like, we all do the best with the information we have at the moment and the circumstances we find ourselves in. There's a line that your grandmother says to you when she's getting ready to leave to go on this trip, this church trip. I think it was that scene when she says, you only deserve good things to happen to you. And I thought that was a really wonderful moment, because I can imagine that I think people are under the impression that kids are told wonderful things about themselves all the time, but it's actually quite different, especially in those kinds of circumstances. So for her to come out right and just say to you that you deserve good things to happen to you, I think is really meaningful.
She was the only one in my life that really would tell me these things. I still have that letter that she wrote to me from the hospital. I have it in her handwriting, and you know, I think about her introducing me to poetry, and though how that sort of really always lifted me up and made me keep reaching for something bigger and better in my life. And I think that my grandmother really recognized, I think that I had a big imagination, but I think that she also knew that I was tormented, and I don't know if she knew exactly why.
Right.
I've thought about that a lot, and if she did, I think it would kill me. But she was always telling me, you know, that there's a scene where she says, you know, come out from under there, that stairwell, that's where the cat lays her kittens, you know, because I was always looking to hide somewhere.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
no more hiding.
Yeah, well, you're definitely not hiding anymore. And I think that's a good thing, because I do think that bad things tend to grow in the dark, you know, figuratively and literally. But there's also a really wonderful through line, which is you sort of grew up with this incredible folklore. I mean, like just the birth name, the name you were given. I don't know how. You were named after your father's mistress by your mother, which is one of the most confounding and yet, from a storytelling point of view, incredible data points. But I can imagine that living with that would be more than terrible. I can't quite imagine that.
It was like a scarlet letter. Every time I heard it, I cringed, and then I think the lowest point, you know, at one point I began to accept it, you know, whatever, just call me that name, I don't care, you know, because my dad always called me Sam, and you know, he never his whole life called me anything but Sam. He refused to call me that name. But I'll never forget when the lowest point was when my mother told my 6-year-old daughter that I was named after an affair. And you know, that's not your mom's real name. Your mom's real name, you know, it just to me was so strange.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know many grandmothers who go around calling their daughters, like, they, you know, it's like, oh, mom, ask your mom,
Right.
not ask Pammy Sue. You know?
Yeah.
Like, who's Pammy Sue? Well, that's your mom. You didn't know that? Like, stuff like that, you know.
Well,
it was like outing me, the outing of my birth name, you know.
Well, and I kind of wonder if she wasn't a bit angry that you got away, you know, angry that you rejected it. You rejected all of it.
Well, I think she was angry at me for so many things. I mean, there's one story that I'll bring up that isn't in the book because I couldn't really work it in, just took too much away from where I was going. But I kind of discovered she was having an affair with a married man because the wife called the house and I answered, and she grilled me, and I was a little girl. And I was very imaginative. I was like 8 years old or 9 years old or something. And she says, you know, oh, well, I'm one of your mom's old college roommates, or, you know, college, you know, whatever. And like, I never thought, like, my mom didn't go to college. I just didn't think, you know, I mean, it's like, so I just start chatting her up. And so I want to make it sound like she's like the boss. Oh yeah, we live on a beautiful farm, and there's, you know, she's got 5 kids now. Oh, and do you live with your dad? No, they were divorced, unfortunately, or I think I might have said he died suddenly. I didn't want to say divorce, and then I said, but she's in Hawaii right now with her new boyfriend, and I think they're going to get married.
Oh my goodness.
So I just spilled the beans, you know, and she didn't speak to me for a good 2 years, I think, like literally. Well, that wasn't in the book because it didn't. But that story is, you know,
it's
another one, you know, like it's just kind of, you know, we live in this day and age now of like the Amber Alert and, you know, the internet, and you can track down, you know, a cat on the internet, you know. But back then, you know, I used to walk around like wondering, is the FBI out looking for me? Am I on a wanted list or something? Nobody was looking for me. Nobody cared. Like,
Right.
I don't know what she thought was thinking. Like, you know,
Yeah.
so.
There's a certain kind of, and I think for people who don't have, who haven't grown up in a situation where all of the people who are really supposed to be taking care of you and looking out for your well-being not only abdicate their responsibility, but also become actively involved in the inverse of that, in the inverse of keeping you safe, might have a difficult time understanding how this all kind of forms you as a person and makes you extremely self-contained and self-reliant. And so you kind of become a planet unto yourself, but it's a chaos planet, right? And so as you're making your way through your life, you're trying to keep it all together. And occasionally it just manifests in these strange, crazy ways. And then when and your dad told a lot of tall tales, let's put it that way. So you didn't even have correct information about yourself. And I remember the story where you were making a drug delivery. And you were informed that the song, you know, a boy named Sue, you know, what is it? A boy named Sue wasn't written about.
A boy named Sue.
Yeah, the Johnny Cash
song. Yeah, I mean, well, you know, you got to understand, when I met my father and he told me, you inspired Cash to write the song A Boy Named Sue, because I told Johnny, I have a girl named Sam.
Right.
And he said, that ain't nothing. I got a boy named Sue. And he goes, and that was how the song. Well, you couldn't look up on the internet back then that Shel Silverstein wrote it, or you know, where's the lore that it was written about Samantha Hart, you know? And you know, and I'm with this old man. He's an A&P heir, very famous man, actually, wealthy heir, and he was very crotchety. I found out later he was going through some very tough times, so he had a reason to be so grumpy. And I was a little hopped up, to say the least. And I was a very talkative person anyway. And by now I've got this like sort of like cowboy slang, British, Australian accent, you know, especially when I was high. And so and so we have this whole dialogue. It's actually one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. Mm-hmm. Because that moment where he says, could you sing it to me? Mm-hmm. And so I try to sing it, and I'm not a good singer, and I'm so shy and trying to remember the words, and I'm literally like really excited that he wanted me to sing this song. And then he goes like, well, girl named Sam, he says, unless your dad's good friends with Shel Silverstein too, that song has nothing to do with you, because Johnny Cash didn't write that song. Well, it was like, wow. I mean, again, this identity, you know, I wrapped so much of my identity around being a girl named Sam. I mean, you know, famous because A Boy Named Sue was written after me, and it was all just crap. It was all just lies. And like, you know, I'd meet people at clubs or, you know, whatever, discotheque, backgammon tournaments, and I would be like, yeah, you know, I'm Sam. You know, Johnny Cash wrote Boy Named Sue after me. Oh, you know, it was an identity, you know, it was like some kind of cool thing instead of this scarlet letter I was named, you know, and then all of a sudden that was taken from me, you know, and I could no longer use that story to pump my own ego up. Like somehow that made me important, you know, that a song was named after me. Like, it's so silly, but when you're that young and that impressionable, and you have so little to cling to in terms of parental love, and that was the one thing, you know, that sort of bonded me with my father, was that story. And suddenly it was just poof, gone. It was a real turning point in my life. I mean, I really think that like almost ended it all, you know, right there. It could have all just, because I was either going to crack and I did go off the deep end after that, but that's why, you know, up until then, I was constantly running away from the abuse, you know, and I was trying to numb myself and anesthetize myself from the childhood abuse. But then it became even bigger for me. Then it became like my father, you know, and that whole thing. And yeah, both those two things together were almost broke me. I mean, it was, you know, it was hard to come back from that. And it might sound really silly, you know, like it's a good song or whatever, but it was so important to me. And, you know, and then to have to play it off like to this guy, like he didn't really just kill me by saying this, like, you know, it was tough. Well, that was really my favorite scene though.
It's a gorgeous scene. I loved it. And I think that, you know, there are a couple things as you were telling this, that there's this sort of pervasive casual violence that occurs around you continually. And this is one of those moments where I felt it reading it. I felt like someone pulling the keystone out of an arch and you're like, oh no, you know, and then of course you have to come back from it and, you know, change it into something else and make light of it. But it also, because it not only, for the reader, it not only pulled away from what you believed about yourself, but it also cracked the final bit of the myth of your father, who I love how you compared him to, and anyone who's lived in LA remembers the huge Marlboro Man billboard that you reference on Sunset Boulevard, right by Chateau Marmont. I mean, the location of it was epic. But for years and years, I remember as a little girl driving, and I had so many stories about the Marlboro Man. I mean, it was just like, he was just magnificent. And so all of a sudden, your dad, who to you is like the Marlboro Man, is he's no longer who you thought he was. You're no longer who you thought you are. And you're in this bizarre circumstance, and you're in New York, and you're with this stranger. And it was one of those moments where you're like, oh, you know, it just kind of pulls the air out of your lungs. And I really, I mean, I'm talking to you, but the book, I mean, I wanted to just grab her and be like, oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You know, it was horrible, but it was beautiful as well. The way you wrote it was really, everything got this kind of weird mythic quality to it. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you know, you keep making this point about saying that you're just a regular girl. You're just not, though. You're an exceptional girl.
Well, you know, it's like, I really appreciate all the compliments I've gotten on the writing, because I barely squeaked through high school, and I, you know, have told people for years, you know, when I would get a job and they'd say, well, where'd you go to college? Well, I didn't go to college. Well, you have to go to college to get the job. And then I'd say, well, I went to the Royal College of Art. Yeah, I went there as a nude model. I wasn't exactly lying, you know, I said Royal College of Art. Okay, you know, people don't really ask beyond that. So, but, you know, when I was writing the book, it really was like, when in my profession work as a marketing person, I sometimes call it like method marketing, like a method actor. You really get into the role of the brand or whatever. Well, this was like method writing. You know, I had to go into that world of that little girl again. Mm-hmm. And it was really strange. It was really cathartic and really a crazy time for me to go through this. My sons and my husband came home one day, and they saw my car, but they didn't see me. And they looked around the house. They thought I went out for a walk, and an hour or so went by, and they were like, well, where is she? And then one of them found me because they could hear me snoring. I was curled up in a little ball in the closet because I had been writing, and I went there. You know, I had that, like, you know, need to like feel safe, like, and it was, you know, honestly, Tulani, I wrote this book, and like, I thought I'm not even going to publish it. I'm just going to have it for my grandkids. You know, I needed to do this. And my husband just kept at me like, it's good. Just put it out for a review. And it's like, I just kind of can't believe people have responded to it as positively as they have. I'm blown away. I'm really humbled by it, because it's just one person's story. You know, there's so many stories out there.
There are so many stories, but I think the way you relay what happened to you is very different. But it also, there's something that's so identifiably American about it, and there's something so identifiably of the era about it as well. So you managed to kind of encapsulate those two things in a very deft way. And I had to keep reminding myself that this was not fiction, because it's so, there are elements of it that are so crazy. And I say that and I say that coming to you as someone who had a crazy life, that maybe one day I'll write my own Blind Pony, but I'm not at that point yet. My therapist and I are still working on it.
We're still working on it. You'll get there.
Yeah, but you know, it's one of those things that I think it's highly relatable, but it also exists, you know, in a literary sort of space that's very American, and it's very uniquely American, and I love that about it also.
Thank you.
And it only can be told from your perspective. I mean, I think this goes into that sort of running with scissors category for me.
Wow.
Well, and I'm not trying to be, you know, I'm not trying to blow smoke, but it's just people who haven't lived in true chaos could not write about chaos this way. And so I guess I also just appreciate it on that level. Because, you know, it'll either kill you or you'll do something great.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, when I was writing the book, I realized, like, putting myself back in the center of it all, and like the memories, and like one of the most chaos things, just random things that this is not fiction, it's true. Like when my dad put sugar in my gas tank so I wouldn't leave, okay? But the capper of that whole thing is getting in the truck with the guy to go to the shop, and there's the beech nut chewing tobacco right there. And he puts this big wad in his mouth, and the trigger of that, it being my grandfather, you know, the smell of that tobacco, just, you know, and being in this vulnerable position of like, now my car doesn't work. I know it's sabotage. You know, before he even told me it was sabotage, I knew it had something to do with Wild Bill. I just knew it. But like, you know, things like, you know, these visceral things in your life, you know, that happen. Like, for example, like I can't have like a screen door snap shut and without jumping still, because of Margie when she left with the money from the cookie jar, you know. So these things that happen, you know, these stories, like, yeah, you're right. It isn't just one thing. Like this, you know, okay, I was abused and then I went on the run or whatever. All these other little things happen, the door snapping, the beech nut chewing tobacco smell, the this, the that, and always, you know, and someone, you know, outing my birth name, and, you know, and my daughter's christening, and just the whole, you know, all these things, like, you can't make it out, you know. It's like, it's true. It's not, they affect you. All those little tiny things, they are memories. Like every day, they're a reminder you went through this.
Yeah. But no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, we had to take the screen door off of our house because I couldn't stand it. My husband finally said, take the door off. I don't care. Like, it's gone, you know?
Yeah. It's, you know, it's interesting. First of all, it's wonderful that you have a wonderful family who you love and who loves you, and, you know, functional, and, you know what I mean? That's, well, I don't think it's luck. I think that it's work, and I think that it's commitment and dedication, and I think that that's
on his part. It's a lot of work.
reflective of both of you. It's reflective.
Crazy lady. He's the most normal, like, sweet man you'll ever meet. I mean, like, I don't think he's ever like
you know what?
hasn't paid a ticket or something. You know, I don't think he's ever gotten a ticket. I mean, he's
oh, well, you know, it's the yin yang for sure.
for sure.
But
For
you know what,
sure.
I think it's wonderful because you know, you kind of do have your happily ever after as much as people can have in that sense. So I think that's also a beautiful part of this story. And it is hopeful throughout. And I also just wanted to say that, you know, the darling little girl you were who had your wood sprite imaginary friends, and you would sit on the moss covered log with the little rabbits and the, you know, the creatures all around you, to have that moment of peace in amidst all of this really terrible reality. You know, those are the kinds of moments that I think are really meaningful for the reader, but also the way that you, I mean, I could tell that I was like, oh, yeah, I see how she, you know, writes her campaigns for, you know, for film projects. Like, you've got a very cinematic voice in this as well. So I was like, oh, I can see it. Oh, I can see it. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just blown away. Again, I just can't tell you how much it means to me that people appreciate the book, because I poured my heart into it, and I wanted it to be something that I could share and would feel good afterward. Like, what if it made me, you know, what if people didn't like it? But you can't be afraid of that in life. You have to just, you know, you have to let it go, you know. And I can honestly say that since I've done that, I just feel so good inside. I feel like a big burden is gone, and, you know, I feel like I'm pursuing other things now that I wouldn't have challenged myself with before. I'm really happy. So,
well, I'm happy for you, because I think you managed to make some space for that by doing this, you know.
yeah.
So I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I'm glad that you went ahead and listened to your husband and got it out into the world, because I think it has a lot of value, and I really, really loved it. So.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I guess we should come to a close. Tell us where we can find you online.
Well, I'm the real Sam Hart on Instagram, and Samantha Hart on Twitter, and I'm also, you can find me on Facebook, and samanthahart.net is my website.
All right.
So, and I love hearing from people, and I did this TV show in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm not even sure why they booked me, but this girl, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn as well. She wrote to me on LinkedIn, and she said she has a very big job, like, and she was taking her coffee break, and the TV was on, and she caught it, and she said she started sobbing. She said, I was talking about her life.
Oh.
And I just, you know, when you hear things like that, you know, what are the odds of, you know, I was like wondering, like, Louisville, Kentucky, like, do you think anybody's gonna like my book in Louisville? But, you know, it was just so touching, this letter from her. And so that's just like, that means everything to me, like, really.
Well, if that was the only thing that you got out of putting this book out, that would have been, you know, reward enough. But I have a feeling that you'll be surprised. I think that you've got long, as we say, this has long legs, I believe. I do.
Oh,
I really do.
Really?
I swear it. I wouldn't lie.
Not to me.
Well, I got nothing to gain out of it. This is not a transactional relationship. I can tell you the truth. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us, sharing your story with all of us. I hope everyone will please pick up a copy. It is absolutely magnificent. Samantha Hart, thank you so much.